Bonjour à vous tous.
Hello, everybody.
Donc aujourd'hui,
So we're now going to make a presentation as to how
Overblog
Overblog was able to use Symfony 2 for the very last version, a version that was released about 2 days ago for our British friends. And before any further ado, let's introduce ourselves. You got Xavier, our CTO, responsible for technical features at Overblog, and thanks to him, everything is actually up and running. And my name is Gérard Donlas, project manager, and I'm working with teams. I'm managing teams. Now, are there any people here present that are not familiar with Overblog? Perhaps, yes, no? Now, what is Overblog? Overblog is a mass public blog platform that was founded in 2004. And today this is #1 in Europe. It's platform #1 in Europe, and that platform was founded for general consumers or general users. It's not a standalone tool as WordPress. It's actually closer to WordPress.com. And this is a hosted blog platform. Overblog is, used to be and still is, a platform which was able to pay bloggers through advertising. The first platform in France that was able to pay advertising proceeds to bloggers that wish to have advertising. And Overblog has over 2 million blogs in 5 languages: French, Spanish, German, Italian, English, and 35 million visitors, single visitors, 250 million pages on a monthly basis, and ours is a 13th site in France, and managed by 55 servers, and we'll see the breakdown, the server breakdown, very soon. But before we talk about Symfony 2 Overblog, now 7 years old, we've always been with the PHP. Things have changed on PHP, but we had JLX, Overblog.com until next week, for example. If you get connected to this, you'll have this current version with 1.1. PHP 5.2, and Postgres 8, and GD is 50 servers for the generation of all the blog, administrative, and portal pages. And this is a 11 slaves and 38 hits and caches, 11 database slaves. We still haven't paid PHP 5.3 or 9, and for Postgres 9, but it's too complex. We tried to transfer and shift that into 5.3. This is heavy duty. We had to redo our projects. Same thing for the database. And now, with respect to migrations and volume, data volumes, now from a technical standpoint, we just wanted to say, well, we're saying to ourselves, we have to revamp the platform. Now, PHP, perhaps a new version, or perhaps a new framework, and change the rules which we hadn't had, and really overhaul the databases. And we set up a technical specificities. Now, from a technical standpoint, we needed to update the platform and change the product and really prop it up differently. And from our technical specificities standpoint, we wanted to really be up to standards in terms of the load. And the load, the additional load, which had to be scalable, which is not the case today. It's very difficult to add machines in a very simple way and be able to really face up to the volume and be able to separate independent services and be able to shut off a problematic service with a DOS on a service, for example, I don't know, comments, be able to stop it without jeopardizing the rest of the platform. Now, of course, the use, in terms of the use, we wanted to optimize page execution time and pace up data access procedures, and no longer have one single project and have a monolithic project, which we had, which was a heavy-duty and constraining project. And in terms of development, test-driving development, this is what we're aiming at, and I really get a kick out of developing this new version, which was not so much the case with a 5-year-old project, which was somewhat stagnating. So we carried out different framework tests. The first one was JLX, because we had a greater experience, 5 years in that framework, JLX. But even though we had experience, we ended up with a negative, with cons as in any communities, but with Genix, we had a problem. How about the project is going to last? It's only maintained by one single person, and for Overblog, for example, we cannot afford having a non-scalable framework that could stop overnight. A Zen framework, well, I'm in a nutshell, but we just had a look at it. No, this was not a full stack, and this is not really a framework, but rather a library of, or just a library community. And Symfony, we visited. Well, this was end of life, Symfony 1, and this is an idea we had in September last. Symfony 2 had already been announced and was actually developing, and Symfony 1 was at the end. It was not modular enough insofar as our needs, and those Symfony 1 versus Symfony 2, well, we'd rather actually underscore Symfony 2, focus on Symfony 2. So, of course, now let's compare this to Symfony 2. Symfony 2 now. It's a full stack framework, and that's why we picked it out, thanks to dependence injections and performances versus number 1, Twig, and internationalization, globalization. Symfony community is a highly active community, which we were striving for, having the very active things, and the sense of support with whom we call to, and they really helped us. The sense of support really helped us out, and a Symfony 1 experience in our own teams. Now, of course, frameworks are associated with pros and cons, and among the cons, I mean, the framework was somewhat young, and we're lacking bundles, and you'll realize that we also had to create our own bundles for part of it, and this was highly coupled with doctrine, although we're not having it as an ORM, we had to leave it, and the cost, of course, the cost for development and learning, the learning curve. I mean, this was we're also part of the cons, and we also studied Overblog and came full circle, and what it was going to turn into with the Symfony 2. I'm going to hand over to Xavier, who was going to explain to you the whole software architectural part and how we focused and worked on Symfony for this Overblog. Hello. Xavier Hausherr, Overblog, and as Gerald told you already, one of our first initial focuses was to avoid the monolithic software as present in the present version. So we really had to be aware and try to break down the whole project into several small projects that could work out independently in a standalone fashion, and from an absolute standpoint, those could actually be used in any type of language and technology. Now, we're all using Symfony 2, we're not going to change, but it could be the case for scalability-related reasons or functional reasons. And all those different projects, since they're standalone projects, need to use any type of technology and supported by any technology without any obstacle. This is a general overview of all the technologies we're using, a fleshed out list. Some projects are supporting some technologies, or supported by some technologies, and I'm not going to talk too much. And this creates a highly decoupled architecture, and so as to avoid data duplication. Now, let me just show you the infrastructure, which is quite a complex infrastructure. And what one notices right away is the great need in communicating from one project to another. And this is something we really worked flat out on, and Symfony really helped us out and supported us quite extensively. One of the first things we did here was to really squeeze all of our projects into this type of format. Or in other words, two different entry points. One entry point, one classical web entry point, and another internal entry point and accessible from, so as to communicate from one project to another thanks to a transport layer. Now, regardless of the interface which we're going through, or which information is going through, it's going through API, no database access, of course not. This is forbidden, but whether internal or external application methods, well, those application methods are the same. So the transport layer is something which we spent a lot of time on, and we started at the very beginning of the project, and REST-like. PC REST-like because it was easier to code. REST is natively integrated into Symfony, and we also had a lot of experience, and we implemented this solution. We drilled down, and the weight which we need, well, we need to build up all the objects from JSON. Now, this actually shifted away according to projects. We have several teams, and each one of the teams can work on different projects. If communication is not up to snuff, then we can drift away. No typical validation process, and as a result, bugs could be created quite easily. PHP is not really typed. It was not highly standardized either. We had no data model. So we've scrutinized several solutions here, and we compared. And let me just show you the present comparison here. The test concept here, or design. The upper part of the slide is the size of a transported object and 6 user objects, conventional objects. I'm not going to describe those in detail. And what can be seen here right away, now the difference between Swift buffer protocol and REST, the size of the object. XML, of course, JSON is less wordy, verbose, so the other one is binary, and they can compress data. It's a lot lighter, less network is used, and allows us to pace up the work. And this is what can be seen below. The average time for 10,000 requests for 6 users. One can see that Swift or protocol buffer performances are 3 to 4 times lower, or upper, actually higher than REST. Why Swift and not protocol buffer? Why? Because API PHP protocol buffer is not integrated to protocol buffer. Now, this is a subpart, which means that the support was not really that extraordinary, and Thrift was actually picked out. For those who are not familiar with Thrift, let me just introduce this. This is a transport layer developed by Facebook for the inter-project communication process, which is now incubed by the foundation, the Apache Software Foundation. The very nice pros is objects are transported, no tables, no JSON. We got definition files that look like C++, and those are automatically compiled by the Thrift compiler in classes and interfaces, directly usable trans-language, cross-language, with over 10 languages being supported here, and PHP, Python, Java, JavaScript, C++, and so on and so forth. And this really allowed us to have this communication among different projects, and we also have a basic type validation, which it's quite basic because they had to base themselves on the lowest common denominator, PHP being did not really help them out. This is a binary transfer, and for PHP there is a compiled C extension directly compiled and integrated within PHP. Very nice performance. No Symfony integration. PHP library was unfortunately obsolete. No MSpace inclusions were hard inclusions. The loader was actually loading the various classes in global variables, and another a very small community. Small support. As a result, we spent a lot of time integrating this within Symfony, squeezing it into Symfony. We worked on it through different points. The first one, we had to Thrift fork. We had to Thrift fork for reasons I talked about already. PHP library is a little too obsolete. We had to rework the PHP library and add namespaces and delete all the inclusions. Hard inclusions, and the autoloader was not used. 10 classes per file, and we just broke down everything, and we also recoded part of the compiler for adaptation purposes. Point number 2, we created a bundle, and that bundle is a Symfony Overblog 3 public bundle, which we based on the dependency injection. Each client, a Thrift client, server Thrift client, is a Symfony service, and as a result, activated upon request. And all the definitions created, hence, are compiled during the cache mode, thanks to pass. And all the files are squeezed into the cache compiler, and as a result, for the users, we created an autoloader in a factory, and we can use either one or the other, just upon request, or as you wish. And we also have 2 modes directly, the controller, classical Symfony controller, which we have access to through HTTP, or socket mode, which we launch upon request, and this allows us to debug more easily than HTTP, because one of the problems for Symfony is this is binary, and debugging binary is no cinch. And unit tests were also squeezed in so as to really operate the whole thing. Third point, we also work with thrifted developers so as to integrate all those different modifications and changes, and as a result, since yesterday or the day before yesterday, they've accepted in the next version version. Number 9, the new version will not. Well, all the changes which we worked on will be integrated into Thrift, and we'll be able to follow up on the new versions and not remake the wheel each time. Now we have a good look at the Pill Thrift operational mode, the protocol, the transport, and input and output. All this is managed by Thrift libraries directly. And then you have the two upper layers, orange and pink layers, that are the code generated by those definitions, and those manage writing and reading, and the client services, and on the left-hand side for the client. Now, the Symfony layer, the Symfony bundle, and the classical controllers, because the whole business part is managed by usual classes that need to be injected within Thrift. And on the right-hand side, a Java example, because this is something we're using today. And the example of a Thrift definition, now quite simple. Definition namespace for each one of the languages. You got an inclusion system, which prevents us from redefining the same classes all the time. We can define exceptions as well, and constant variables, constant items, and transport user objects with optional fields. And the most important thing, the service, which is the service definition with each one of the methods at hand, the output, input, and whether it produces an exception, which is not compulsory at all. Now, those definitions are compiled. And this is the configuration example. One example as squeezed into Symfony. You divide your service, and business class, very conventional. You tag it for autoloader, and you can inject whatever you want. The definition of the bundle Thrift. And you jot down the definitions, and you declare the server. Now you declare the created service and client if needed. And now this is a client code, Thrift. Now this is quite simple. This is a controller, which we call a user. Now those are PHP methods, avoiding mistakes or errors. And now, of course, fatal error. Now this code is generated. It's Thrift generated, and with an exception 404. And server versus simple server example in.
Un exemple serveur très simple,
and,
on retourne une instance d'un objet
for example, a user object status. Now this is the hard example. Now on the upper side of the slide, Thrift generates an interface, an user if interface, which enables us to secure the whole process when creating a service. If the definition is changed, then it's hindered, and this really enhances security, especially in our cases with lots of teams working on this. Developers, for example, that are not working on core business projects or activities. Definitions are highly legible. All they got to do is read it, and they know what they have to sound off. Now, this is the integration of the transport layer with the great performance levels, and 2 times 3 compared to REST. I mean, REST was extremely complicated, at least from our side. Now, this is the end of the Thrift presentation. Presentation number 2. SSO.
Alors, pourquoi SSO? Pourquoi avons-nous besoin de ça?
Why do we need SSO? Various projects. Many of them need to be authenticated in terms of the administration, comments, portal, public API, soon to be open. Now, of course, it's rather cumbersome. So that's why we need SSO. On Overblog, all administration is carried through JavaScript. So this JavaScript application needed to be able to validate a session or a conventional PHP script. It's scalable as well, which is easy enough, I suppose, because it's a single service. Also, it had to be able to kill a session, so as to avoid any potential issues. And also with our system, we needed it to be plugged into other systems such as Facebook. So there was a bundle that was perfect for that, the SSO bundle with security. We needed to adapt a few things, though, in order to fully meet our needs. With a provider that was created through a service, our main provider
un autre provider, par exemple, qu'on a actuellement,
we had
Facebook
another
Connect,
provider,
on utilise
Facebook
le bundle
Connect,
fausse Facebook Connect, je crois qu'il s'appelle.
which bears the same
nous avons
name.
créé un bundle pour sécuriser
We also
tous les
created a
différents services. Il
bundle
suffit
in order to
d'intégrer
secure all
votre configuration dans
services.
security.yaml,
You
votre projet est
only
protégé. C'est assez simple. Dans ce bundle, on embarque
need
l'authentication
to go
provider
through a few
qui permet de
simple
valider le
steps.
token.
Also, you need a main entry
Très important, on va
point
pas redemander à chaque
to
fois
be
au SSO pour
located on
valider.
the
Ça prend un peu
SSO,
de temps. Et
but that takes very
on
little
embarque aussi le
time.
voteur
And
pour la gestion,
also,
tout ce qui est gestion des droits, en fonction des droits de l'utilisateur, bien sûr.
you need
Des
to keep in
modifications
mind
qu'on a
all
dû
of the
faire.
user rights. Now, there was
Chaque
something
projet,
we need to
on
modify
n'a plus
here.
son point d'entrée.
Each project
Quand on
doesn't have its own
passe
entry
point
point.
sur un des projets, on est redirigé sur le SSO.
When you
pour
go through an
pour
entry point, you're
authentification. Idem pour
redirected
disconnect.
towards
Quand on disconnecte
SSO
d'un
for
projet, il
connect
faut
and
déconnecter du
disconnect.
SSO. Du coup, pareil,
So
sur,
when you disconnect from projects, you need to
le logout
disconnect from the
du
SSO.
security
Same
bundle, on
goes
redirige
for the
vers le SSO.
security logout on
Le token qu'on
the
transporte, c'est un token complet,
security bundle.
encrypté avec des
The
clés RSA.
token is
Il embarque les
complete.
droits
It has rights
pour éviter de,
that
pareil,
are
demander les droits
embedded
toujours,
in it in
vers le
order
SSO.
to
C'est lourd, c'est long.
make sure that
Ce
you do
token a une
not
durée de vie
have
assez
to go
courte
through this
pour des raisons de
endless
sécurité. On va pas le laisser traîner,
authorization
pendant trop longtemps.
process at
Du coup, on
every
utilise le
step
Remember
of
Me
the
pour faire
SSO.
de
We also
l'authentification
use the
longue.
Remember Me
Si jamais
option
votre
in
token est expiré
order
ou que la
to
session sur un serveur est
make
expirée,
sure that
il va être rebalancé sur le
authentication
serveur
is
SSO,
as smooth
toujours
as
créer un token.
possible.
Tout va bien. Donc il est encore en base. Et enfin, comme je disais, l'administration
Last
donc en
but not
JavaScript,
least,
elle appelle une API.
Administration is in
Les ressources
JavaScript, as
protégées
I
vont rebalancer vers
said.
le
So
SSO,
that means we
ça
need
fera
an
des choses qui ne sont pas
API.
désirées. Du coup, on catch toutes les exceptions.
So
on
we
a
are
juste laissé
catching
quelques points
all
d'entrée,
security
d'ailleurs,
exceptions to
qui lui
return
redirige véritablement vers le SSO,
401
les autres,
instead
rebalance
of
les 401.
redirect,
afin que le JavaScript puisse savoir si
so that
l'utilisateur a le droit
JavaScript is
d'accéder ou non.
able to know whether a user may accede
diagramme
to
à
this
main,
part
c'est
or
rapide.
not.
Donc je
Very
disais,
quick diagram.
la clé principale de transport,
The main transportation
token
key is the
encodé.
token
Donc, fonctionnement,
encoded
voilà,
in its
l'utilisateur
coded
demande une ressource
version.
protégée.
The
Il est
user
dirigé vers
hits
le
a
SSO.
protected resource,
Le
redirected
SSO
to
demande à l'utilisateur de
SSO.
s'authentifier de la
SSO
manière,
asks the user
qu'il veut,
to
soit la classique,
log
le
in
mot de passe, soit le Facebook Connect.
with a login name and passwords
Une fois
or with
l'utilisateur
Facebook
authentifié,
Connect. Once the
le
user
SSO
is
notifie
authenticated,
le serveur que l'accès
SSO
a été
notifies the
autorisé,
server that
redirigeant
access
l'utilisateur
was
avec ce token.
approved by redirecting
bien sûr, on stocke le
all
token
of the
sur,
information
le
with the
utilisateur.
token.
Le serveur crée une
The
session
server creates a
et
session,
l'utilisateur est dessus et peut accéder
user is
maintenant
on
aux
it,
ressources.
and can now have access to all
Tant que le
resources.
token et le Remember Me n'ont pas
Token and
expiré,
Remember
on peut se
Me,
loguer sur n'importe quel
for
des
as long as
services.
they have not
Un serveur
expired,
qui
you
a
may
passé son
log into
utilisateur
all
valide le
services.
token auprès du SSO, il le connaît, il est OK.
And
il
the
le fait.
token is validated by the SSO every time, but
Si
automatically.
on veut killer l'utilisateur, il suffit d'effacer le token du serveur
And you can
SSO.
also erase the
l'utilisateur.
token from the SSO
Voilà, c'est
server
donc pareil,
when
comme
a
pour le SSO.
user
Du
is
coup,
removed.
maintenant, on va passer à un troisième sujet sur
Let's
lequel
now
on a
move on to a third
beaucoup utilisé
topic,
Symfony, qui est
for
tout le
which
système de
we
theming,
greatly
avec
used
Twig.
Symfony.
Et là-dessus, je laisse Gérald continuer.
And I'll let Gerald take over for this part of our presentation.
Donc, c'est vrai qu'un autre point
Block
qui était important chez nous
themes
sur
with
Overblog,
Twig,
vu qu'on est une plateforme de
Sandbox.
blog, il faut pouvoir
Overblog is a
customiser
blog platform, so you need to be able to
blog,
customize the
public.
design
Donc, on
of
avait
the
un
public
point
blog.
important par rapport à la version
So that
courante.
was a very important feature for us compared to the current, to the common version.
Les blogueurs ne pouvaient
With
essentiellement
markup
changer les
and
CSS.
bloggers were
Donc, c'est
not
vraiment très
able
limitant, c'est
to
devenu
change
frustrant pour
anything
les
there,
blogueurs.
which was
Et
highly
là, on pouvait
frustrating
partir
for
d'une
them.
principe
So our
entière
new
sur leur design.
basic
le markup
principle
HTML,
this time
le
was
CSS,
the following.
le JS.
They create the
Donc,
markup
mon besoin,
HTML,
c'était
the
d'avoir un
JSS,
thème totalement customisable. On
JL.
leur donne,
So
ils
this
connaissent
was the
HTML,
idea. They know
CSS, JS, on
HTML,
leur donne juste le langage
CSS,
pouvoir
JL. We only
travailler
give
sur les
them
objets.
the language in
ils ont
order
leur
for them to work on the
Pour ça, il leur
objects,
fallait aussi un
and then
langage,
they
donc,
have a blog. But in
accessible.
order to do
Pas
this,
demander
they
à tout le monde
also
d'apprendre le PHP ou
needed
n'importe
an
quoi.
accessible blog.
Donc il nous fallait vraiment un langage accessible pour les designers.
What I mean
Il fallait
there,
pour
they
nous, de notre
needed
côté,
to have
qu'on
very
puisse avoir avec ce langage la maîtrise dessus,
easily
donc qu'il soit sandboxé, qu'il soit
understandable
mis dans un jail pour pas qu'on ait
language. They needed
surprise sur le
everything
serveur.
to be
Bien
explained
entendu,
in
vu
simple
le trafic,
words.
il faut que les pages soit mise en cache.
Also, pages needed to be cached.
Et c'est pour ça en fait qu'on est parti sur Twig. On a
That's
testé
why
là aussi
we
différents
opted for
systèmes
Twig.
de rendu.
We had
On a
tried
oublié, bien
out
sûr, Smarty,
various
à cause des performances, à cause
systems.
du langage
Smarty,
qui
we
est
didn't
qui est
choose it
compliqué,
because of
qui
the
est très proche du
performances,
PHP, qui
because
n'est pas à la
of
portée
the
de tout le monde.
language, which is
Au niveau de
very close to
Twig,
PHP, all
ce qui nous a
right,
intéressé,
but is
c'est
not
entre autres
necessarily
le langage
understandable
qui est
by
presque
everyone.
littéral. Quand vous faites
Twig, we really
if
liked it
blog
because
title
when you
is not
type in
empty, c'est bien plus
if
simple
blog
que
title is not empty, it's
is
much more
underscore
simple
nul,
than
dollar
is
this,
underscore
blog, ainsi
null,
de suite,
dollar
et
this,
j'en passe.
so on and
Il y
so
avait déjà ça, donc, sur
forth.
Twig qui nous intéressait, c'est ce markup. Il y
So
a
the
la
markup we
sandboxing et
thought
les
was
policies, donc
easily
permettre
understandable, plus
à
the
nos
sandboxing
blogueurs
and
de faire leur thème,
policies
mais ne pas avoir
that
accès à
made it
toutes
possible
les
for our
fonctionnalités
bloggers
de Twig,
to
d'avoir accès qu'à
opt
certains
for their
éléments
themes
qu'on peut maîtriser,
without
soit parce qu'ils sont
letting
certains
them having
résultats qui
access
sont
to
trop risqués,
everything.
trop en machine. Il y a la possibilité pour nous, en tant qu'Overblog, de créer des
Also,
filtres. Donc ça,
we
on
were
le fait quand on
able
pose
to
des
create
images.
our very
Si les
own
utilisateurs ont besoin
filters.
de redimensionner des images, on leur a créé des filtres.
For
pour pouvoir,
example, in
chaîner
order
dans
to
le
crop
Twig.
an
Bien entendu,
image,
compiler les thèmes, donc les thèmes en dur dans le file system.
there's a
Et
possibility for that,
c'est fourni avec Symfony, donc on
and
va
we
pas s'en
could
priver non
provide
plus.
that to our users.
Donc là, en fait, on a un schéma
And
qui
also
présente
Twig is part of Symfony,
plus ou
so we
moins
thought might as well.
comment on travaille avec la sandbox de Twig. Il faut savoir que
Here's how
Twig,
we work out
aujourd'hui,
the Twig
on va l'avoir
sandbox.
dans deux parties. La partie designer qui va
We
soumettre
use
son thème
Twig
et la
in the
partie
designer
visiteur qui va
part
récupérer
and
une
also in
page
the
de blog.
visitor part
Donc aujourd'hui, un
in
designer,
order to
quand il
retrieve
crée
a
son
blog
thème,
page.
il va nous le soumettre.
So the
via
user,
l'administration.
when
On va
creating a
passer par
theme,
la
will
sandbox de Twig,
submit
on va
it over
vérifier
to
que
us,
d'un,
and
la
through
syntaxe est
the
correcte,
Twig
et que deux,
sandbox,
il
we
a
will
accès
check
qu'à
whether the
commetteur
syntax
qu'on lui
is
donne, auquel on lui donne
correct
accès.
and
Il a
whether
accès à ce
he
plus.
only
À
had
ce moment-là,
access
la
to the
sandbox va vérifier,
methods
va
we
lui
gave
faire une
him.
réponse.
Then the
C'est OK, ça
sandbox
ne l'est pas.
will send an
Si c'est pas
answer
OK,
yes, no, and if
il
it's
recommencera.
not all right,
Dans le cas
the
contraire,
user will
on
have to
considère que c'est
try
bon, et là, on va
again.
sauver dans la base de données.
Otherwise, we say that
Donc,
it's
vous pouvez
good
voir
and
que la sandbox
integrate
nous
it
dit qu'il y
into
a un
the
seul endroit pour
database.
l'instant. On
So,
considère que
as
dans
you
une
can
base de données,
see,
les thèmes
in the
sont safe.
database, the
Ils ont
themes
que
are
les
considered
éléments,
as safe.
nécessaires.
All the
Au moment de la
boxes
mise
are
en base de données,
checked.
on va aussi mettre à jour la
During
date
that
de mise à jour du
database
thème, et ça,
phase, we
ça va être très
also
important pour le
update
refresh
the
du blog
date
niveau
theme,
frontal.
and that is very
Et donc, au niveau
important
frontal, la
for
partie
frontal
inférieure, sur les visiteurs,
date
une personne va donner une
updating.
page. Là, notre moteur de rendu du
On
thème
the
qui va
visitor
utiliser
side,
le thème,
the theme that is
le
used
rendu Twig classique va vérifier en base de données si le thème est plus frais ou non que celui qu'il y avait en mémoire.
will
Et s'il est plus frais, il va récupérer le thème, le contenu de la page à charger, et va regénérer ça avec
lead
Twig.
to a
Alors pourquoi
various
on a mis
number
la
of
sandbox au
controls.
niveau des designers et
And
pas
why
de côté?
did we only
Pour deux raisons.
include the sandbox
Au
for
niveau
the
de la génération
user
des
and not
pages,
for the
on
visitor?
souhaite avoir les mêmes
Well,
performances,
for
donc pour le
page
moment, on a
generation, we
exclu
wanted
la
to
sandbox au niveau
be
de la génération des
as
pages,
performing
mais
as
aussi
possible.
parce que Overblog,
So that's why we
si
excluded
vous voyez en fait la
sandbox
partie
for
à côté de
page
la base de données, vous avez
management,
get
and
theme
also
markup
on one
et page
part
contents.
of the
Le
database
thème
you have
markup, c'est
get
la partie
theme
designer, ce qui
markup
est
and
contrôlé. Et
page
le page content, c'est ce que
content.
Overblog va injecter
What
dedans.
page
Donc, c'est du
content
contenu parmi
means
votre
what
article ou votre liste d'articles. Là, on va
what
passer aussi
Overblog
par Twig, on va peut-être passer
injects
aussi par des
into
méthodes
it.
qui ne sont pas données pour le
And in
designer,
order to do
mais pour
this,
lesquelles
we
nous, on a déjà
use
la main dessus.
methods
Donc,
which
si
are
on
not
passe par
available to
le
designers.
régulier de Twig, c'est tout simplement parce que Overblog va utiliser des méthodes qui ne
So
sont pas données aux
Overblog here
designers.
uses
Alors
methods
comment on
that
l'a mis en
are
place? Au niveau de la configuration,
not accessible for
là, je reprends la
designers.
configuration qu'on rend dans le YAML.
What
définissons
configuration did
les
we choose
différents
for Sandbox?
fonctionnalités
First,
que
we
nous
defined the
avons autorisées. Par
various
exemple, dans les tags,
functions
on
that are
autorise
authorized in the
le
tags
if et
here.
la liste.
We'll
Donc, on
authorize
n'autorise pas le for.
if and
Dessus,
list.
aujourd'hui, et je crois que c'est ce qui est aujourd'hui chez nous, ils ont juste droit if, else
So
et,
they
et
can
list.
only
Et
have
avec ça, ils peuvent
if,
déjà
else,
boucler,
and
faire des
list.
itérations.
And this is how they are
Ils ont les
able to
filtres,
make
donc, qu'on va
iterations. They have
proposer. Donc là, je vous ai mis
filters as
une
well.
liste
Here
sous
are
filtres, capitalized,
a
date,
few
default,
examples of
upper et
filters,
lower.
capitalized,
S'ils utilisent par exemple
date,
Truncate, ils vont
default,
être refusés.
upper, lower.
Alors, une fonction, donc là j'ai mis custom, c'est une fonction
You
que
can
nous avons
also
créée
have
pour eux. Pas de properties publiques
policy
et des
function,
méthodes. Là, on voit
custom
bien un
here.
objet de type blog, alors que j'ai schématisé, ou dans lequel on
No
va donner
policy
accès
properties.
au titre du blog et à son URL. Donc,
And the
on peut directement
methods,
avoir
access to the
ces objets
blog
en main.
and to the URL.
Ensuite, donc, dans votre
To the blog
configuration,
title and to the
vous,
URL.
vous injectez en fait votre sandbox. Dans
Then
votre
you're
sandbox, les paramètres
able
que vous avez tout dessus.
to
Et dernière étape, là vous
adapt all your
vous activez votre
parameters
sandbox
in your
avec,
sandbox as
l'injection que vous faites
created.
juste
And last step, you tag the sandbox
votre twig est
extension,
quasiment prêt à être
or
sandboxé.
rather, you
Qu'est-ce que ça
have a
signifie au
twig
niveau PHP?
extension that's
On va
almost
partir d'une
ready to
source
use.
HTML. Comme je l'ai dit,
Now,
avec
how
Xavier,
do we
pour fournir
evaluate
leur code
the
HTML, en fait,
twig
en gros, ils ont
markup?
un gros input dans lequel ils mettent leur code
So here
HTML.
you have a huge input
On
part.
crée une instance twig, et là on
We
va en fait créer un
create
twig
a
loader string,
twig
en fait, parce qu'on passe sur du fichier et
entity,
sur le contenu, la chaîne
and
envoyée par
everything
le
is
designer.
done
On
based
désactive le
on the
cache,
content as sent
parce
by
que
the
twig,
designer.
sandbox twig chez nous
The
est utilisé
cache
pour la
is
vérification, donc pas la peine
deactivated.
de stocker sur
The
le file
twig
system
sandbox, we only
les,
use it for checking
fichiers.
purposes.
Vous activez, vous chargez une sandbox, vous l'activez,
You
vous
upload
l'injectez
a
dans votre twig,
sandbox,
et à ce
you
moment-là,
put it into your twig,
est
and
sandboxé.
then
Donc là, on va
twig
mettre
is
dans un package la
sandboxed.
génération du thème par twig.
It is the
On passe
newest
ce twig
generation
du
of
thème,
the theme.
qui est sandboxé. Et là, s'il y a une erreur, donc
Then that
là, on catch, dans
happens.
cet exemple, là, je catch une security error, c'est-à-dire
And
par exemple,
here's
une méthode
an
qui n'est
example
pas
with
autorisée,
a
qui est
security
appelée dans le twig.
error. That means one
Ça
of
peut
the
être d'autres, bien
methods
sûr,
that
on
was used
explique
is not
différemment,
authorized.
par rapport à la syntaxe, par rapport à
You know,
la
the
sécurité
errors
ici.
that can
Donc
be
là, avec ça, en
related
fait,
to
on permet
security
d'avoir
or
le contrôle
syntax.
sur ce qui est
This
généré
is
par
how we're
l'utilisateur. C'est vrai que quand on
able to
donne la
have
main
some sort
à
of
un grand
control
public,
on what
il
is
n'est pas toujours
generated
simple
by
de savoir
our
ce qui va être fait
users. You know,
avec les méthodes qu'on leur
the
donne.
public at
Et c'est
large
là où
never
Twig
really
aujourd'hui
know
répond
what they're
à nos
going to
besoins sur
do.
Overblog.
So that
Un autre
was
point
perfect
qu'on utilise
for
sur
us,
Overblog,
that system.
comme Overblog est
Here's something else that we use
sur
on
5 langues et
Overblog.
maintenant bientôt plus,
Overblog is
on avait un
available
besoin
in 5 languages
d'internationalisation
and even
du
more
projet
very
et une façon
soon.
simple
So
de le
we
faire.
needed the
Là
project
aussi,
to be
Symfony a répondu à nos besoins
internationalizable.
avec le format XLIF,
And
qui est cette
the
norme de
XLIF
traduction.
format
Et nous avons
was
utilisé Pootle comme outil pour nos
the best
traducteurs aujourd'hui.
option for us,
Donc,
and we
le
used
XLIF, vous l'avez,
Pootle open
déjà
source
dans
tool for
Symfony.
translation
Nous générons nos fichiers en
purposes.
XLIF. Nous envoyons tout ça
So
dans
we
notre
manage
outil
all
Pootle.
of
Pootle, c'est un outil
our
open source, vous pouvez télécharger
files in
n'importe où.
XLIF format.
Là,
Pootle,
on est
well,
dans
we
le sens.
downloaded it. I think it's in
Il
Python.
prend en entrée tous les fichiers XLIF.
It takes all of the XLIF format. Our translators have access to the various keys, translate them, and
Ce
then
qui est intéressant dans
it's
Pootle,
dispatched.
c'est que Pootle
Pootle
va
is
travailler sur le XLIF, sur
quite
XML.
nice
Et
because
donc là, on va
it
voir, si vous avez eu
works
l'habitude de travailler un peu avec
on
le XLIF,
XML
Pootle a
and
ajouté des
XLIF.
attributs.
So here
On va
you
par exemple dans
see
le
that
contenu,
a
il va
number
ajouter si la clé est approuvée ou non par un traducteur.
of
Donc, on va pouvoir, lorsqu'on fait
attributes
un
were
import,
added.
on n'a pas toujours
So,
à recréer les traductions. Il va de même dans
That's
target
quite good
state,
because here you can
on
see
voit
whether
qu'il est,
the translated
qu'il est mis en
material
traduit.
was
Il
first
pourrait être dans notre état, par
approved
exemple,
by a
à traduire
translator or not,
ou
so we
obsolète
don't
parce
need
que
to
la langue de
translate
référence
over
a
and
été-
over
a
again
été
the
changée.
same thing.
Donc,
Or it
c'est
may
là
say,
où
well,
chez
it's
nous, Pootle
obsolete
est un outil
because
qui
one of
va-
the
qui nous permet de traduire facilement
former
le projet.
available languages
Et demain, on peut même
is no
imaginer
longer
ouvrir
available.
cet outil de
So
traduction
in the future,
à
we
une
could very
communauté
well
chez
open
Overblog
this
pour, par exemple,
translation tool
lancer
for
du
a
portugais,
community
lancer,
on
du chinois, ou
Overblog
d'autres
in
langues
order
qui
to
souhaitent,
have
qui souhaitent
an
traduire.
Overblog in Portuguese, in Chinese,
Et
so
donc
on
là,
and so
on a fait en fait
forth.
le tour de toutes les problématiques que
So
nous avons
I think we've run through
sur
all of the
Overblog,
topics
et
we
avec
wanted
lesquels
to
on a su
discuss
répondre
with
avec
you.
Symfony pour ces nouveaux outils. Comme je vous l'ai dit en introduction, on
As
a
I
lancé
said in my
le nouvel
intro,
Overblog sur la
we
plateforme
rolled
anglaise, donc
out
je vous invite à aller sur
Overblog
overblog.com pour tester.
on the
À partir de la semaine
English-speaking
prochaine, vous
platform.
allez
So
avoir aussi la
make sure
possibilité
that
dans
you
les autres
check it
langues,
out.
c'est uniquement en
From
anglais.
next week
Et c'est vrai
on,
que c'est
the
grâce
other,
à Symfony,
the other
ça
languages
fait
will be
un grand
available
virage, mais
with
c'est
the new
grâce à Symfony aujourd'hui qu'on est
Symphony.
arrivé à faire cette toute nouvelle plateforme.